Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 17th of May 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson, and joining me today, I'm delighted to say, Patrick Henningsen. Welcome back to the programme. Patrick, it's been quite a while since you've been on.
It's been a while, and I'm really impressed with your new studio. It's quite a step up, Mike.
Yep, thanks very much. Well, we had a great weekend over the weekend at Alternative View 7. Here's a picture of Ian presenting, and spectacular audience, spectacular buzz about the place, and a great range of speakers.
I was impressed. I mean, it's just great to see a room with that many people in it packed.
Yeah.
There was standing room only for the whole weekend. Great presentations. I'm just always blown away by how much I learn when I go to this event.
Yeah.
And it's great when we work as hard as we do on the daily news cycle. We don't have time to really sit down for 1 or 2 hours to learn about some of these issues in depth. So it's invaluable in that respect.
Yes. And on the Sunday night, we managed to do a Sunday Wire. A few technical difficulties in the new venue, but it went very well.
Yeah, we got it off the ground. It was a little touch and go there. I had my finger on the abort button for a few minutes, but it was great. As you can see in that image there that you're showing, Mike, this is myself, you, and Field McConnell, who was delivering a presentation on Sunday at the event. And Field is animated as ever, and quite a character, but it was great. We had about, I think we had a total of about five or six guests, 6 guests in total that dropped in on that production. And it's a 3-hour show, again, using the same road kit that we had brought to the Middle East just last month. And it seemed to work really well. Great internet speeds, of course, here in the UK. So, have the uploads and download speeds, Mike. It's quite a luxury coming from the Middle East.
Yes.
I was using a 4G mobile
Yes.
router, and you never knew when you were going to get a signal. But being in Britain, absolutely lightning fast internet speeds. So that was a little bit of a getting used to that again. It was a pleasant surprise in a way, but
Indeed.
yeah, it was something.
Yes. So so we managed to find a room, and Field McConnell with us there. He was discussing all kinds of subjects, but mainly Hillary Clinton's links to September 11th. We had you discussing. Tell us about your talk.
My talk was called The Art of Resistance. So I was just showing some photography and things that I had collected and learned during the month of March and April when we were in the Middle East, broadcasting from there, and also just doing a general media critique and talking about the concept of consensus reality, which I think is something we've been talking about for a couple of years, but it's a concept that I think more and more people are sort of beginning to understand.
Yes.
What the bottom line is with mainstream media. They're trying to establish consensus reality, and I'm just blown away by how many people are catching on to this concept now.
Indeed.
Yeah, very educated crowd, very aware crowd, awake crowd at the AV events.
Well, I suppose one of the subjects which might be described as a form of consensus reality is the EU referendum PSYOP, which is ongoing. David Cameron speaking at the World Economic Forum today. I didn't get a chance to see everything of what he said. I'm not terribly interested in everything of what he said, to be quite honest, because I'm quite sure it's just the same dumbed down rhetoric that he's been using for the last lot of weeks. He's saying we're now 37 days away from this crucial referendum. Staying in the EU is right for our economy. It's right for our businesses. And of course, they are pushing, they're continuing to push all the fear mongering around this to try and encourage people to vote to stay in. In the meantime, George Osborne, this gives a clue as to the desperation he was speaking at Ryanair, and Michael O'Leary had apparently invited him to go and speak about the EU referendum, and he was really describing the Brexit campaigners as conspiracy theorists. It was spectacular. They say it's all a massive conspiracy, Osborne said. So that's everyone from Mark Carney to Christine Lagarde to Barack Obama to the entire editorial team at ITV, the staff at the IMF and the OECD, to hundreds of economists, a majority of leaders of small, medium and large businesses, They think they're all part of some global stitch-up to give misinformation to the British people. He's off his head. This is a sign of desperation if he is throwing the conspiracy theory allegation at anybody who is arguing against remaining within the European Union.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because we've been covering and talking about this for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And this issue kind of really, to me, it really became, I could see this on the horizon when the coalition was formed between the Tories and the Liberal Democrats.
Yes.
Because you had some very committed, like lifelong Europhiles within this group whose whole life's work has been, the European Union, basically.
Yes.
And all of a sudden we see this shift, U-turn, which happened recently, right before the last general election, and correlate this with the rise of UKIP. And to me, it just seems like we have the perfect conditions for a bait and switch with regards
Absolutely.
to this issue. So I don't put any currency in anything that our leaders are saying right now in terms of their sincerity of the Brexit issue, as it's so called. But is it a case, Mike, of we're going to give you the vote, and when they lose the vote, they'll be able to say, well, we tried, we gave them the vote, and then back to business as usual, deal with the fallout, bring in new control measures to deal with the street mobs after everyone goes nuts, when it doesn't pass? Is this what we might be looking at?
I personally think we're looking at a vote to come out, a vote which isn't going to be delivered on. We're looking at a number of years of chaotic discussion about why we're not, at the very least, if they follow Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, they're saying 2 years before that's ever completed. Well, all kinds of dirty deals can be done in 2 years, but actually some other commentators saying up to 10 years of argument, discussion, and punditry, and
and protests breaking out here and there.
And of course, in the meantime, the open borders policy will continue to be ramped up, and the tension around that will continue to be ramped up. And I think we're going to start seeing civil unrest on that particular issue. And as I say, Britain has made it absolutely clear that, for example, the free trade agreements such as TTIP are right at the heart of their economic or trade policy. That's not going to go away.
No matter if you stay in Europe or not, TTIP is already a done deal.
It's a done deal.
Yeah.
So the point that I've been making is if you vote to stay in, you're voting for TTIP because that's made clear in Cameron's documentation on this. But if you vote to come out, the work only begins on the day after the referendum. That is not the end of it. That doesn't mean that we're coming out.
So you're saying the establishment has already hedged the result either way?
I actually don't think they care what the result is because
they've hedged their bets both ways.
The policies are in place. They're going to be implemented whichever way the referendum goes.
And they'll manage the fallout if there's fallout and the other way as well. Okay.
Yes. Now, an interesting article in the Financial Times today, Cornwall's Brexit backers show that money cannot buy love, EU love. And Cornwall is an interesting part of the UK because, of course, this is the area where the sort of nationalistic ideals have been promoted by the European Union with a view to regionalisation, devolution, and getting Cornwall split off from the rest of England. And the point that is made in this article is a population of 530,000 in Cornwall, 654 million euros between 2007 and 2013, and another 600 million euros going in from 2013 to 2020. But when you actually go down to Cornwall at the moment, you have to wonder where all this money is being spent because actually, year on year, Cornwall is looking poorer. So where is all this money going? Well, a couple of years ago, Brian Gerrish did a talk in Cornwall called "In Cornwall and Concerned." And we're going to play that out straight after the news. If you're watching this on the UK Column website, you'll see that on the live stream. That gives, although it is a couple of years old now, gives a very clear idea of where this money has gone. It has been moved in other directions. It's not going to the people that it's supposed to be going to. So if the Financial Times is wondering about why the EU can't buy love in Cornwall, it's because the Cornish people aren't seeing the majority of this money. And this is typical of EU grant giving and EU corruption, shall we say. Okay, let's move on. There was an international meeting on the Islamic State threat in Libya, in Vienna, over the weekend. Philip Hammond was there, of course, although that's Kerry and Lavrov in the picture. Hammond had this to say: there's strong support for the international community for the Libyan political agreement and the new Libyan government of national accord to succeed. This meeting has helped to maintain momentum to demonstrate the unity of that support. But the fact of the matter is, Pat, that there is still no unity in Libya. This is not a proper government. This is the puppet show that the Western elites would like to see in place in Libya. But Libya is just as chaotic as it has been over the last few years.
Sure. So these are the same people, well, not Russia per se, but the U.S., Britain, France are the people who absolutely destroyed the country of Libya to help basically collapse it as a nation state.
Yeah.
And so they're meeting now and saying that we really need to succeed to get a result. They backed a puppet government, the National Transition Council, I think it was called. And they set this up in a foreign country, and they parachuted them in after the assassination of that state leader, Muammar Gaddafi. And look what happened. The country is basically destined to be broken up into three main tribal regions, and so three countries in one. It allows the powers to come in by keeping it unstable, by keeping the different parts of Libya at each other's throats, by inserting ISIS. This allows them to sort of govern over it as a protectorate by NATO or whoever. So that's clearly what's going on here. If Libya was stable, there would be no need for NATO to be involved or any of these leaders to be meeting. So stability is their enemy.
And in the meantime, the Russian response to NATO's so-called missile defense system continues, and Putin saying that this is an issue which is going to have to be addressed by Russia. They're not going to put up with the NATO rhetoric for very much longer, are they?
No, I think NATO keeps encroaching around Russia's borders, and then keeps saying that no, we're not. Originally, you remember, Mike, when they were selling this missile defense shield? Mm-hmm. If anyone has a memory, which very few people seem to these days, the justification was that this was to guard against an a stray Iranian missile. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about Russia. And then all of a sudden, when the Ukrainian situation went into meltdown, then it became about Russia. Mm. So they pulled a bait. NATO pulled a bait and switch on that issue. So this is really just about maintaining the tension, and to justify the existence of NATO, but also to keep the defense contractors who are involved in this particular project doing well. Mm. Because as we're about to probably talk about later in the show, they have other plans for the military consolidation of Europe in the near future.
Yeah, indeed. Well, this is kind of a standalone article, but pretty spectacular in its own right. How transparent or how obvious do they have to make it that there's a cover-up going on? I mean, this is incredible. 6,700 pages of the Congressional Torture Report. So far, there's been a 500-page summary released. But the main detail of the report has now apparently just accidentally been deleted. So it was on an external hard drive, which was encrypted, and then it was copied somewhere else, and the hard drive was destroyed, which they say was typical CIA protocol. And then the file, the destination file, was accidentally deleted, and they claim no backups.
This is the federal bureaucracy's equivalent of the dog ate my homework. So, yes. Perfectly reasonable explanation, of course. Who makes backup copies these days? I'm sure top secret government agencies don't back up anything. And of course, there shouldn't be any hard copy laying around either, right? Everything was on one thumb drive, and whatever. There was a data problem on that drive. So I can totally understand how this happened to the CIA.
These poor guys, they have no IT capability at all, do they?
They're so underfunded as well.
Yeah.
They're not getting the right USB sticks. I think that's the problem.
Yes. Well, tomorrow is the Queen's speech. Excellent. We're looking forward to that. What are we expecting to see on there? it remains to be seen in detail. Some of the speculation in the press continues the constitutional reform agenda. So the House of Commons, and particularly the government, pretty upset about the number of times that the House of Lords has stopped them passing legislation, and particularly statutory instruments. Now, many people still don't understand what statutory instruments are, but this is a form of secondary legislation where an Act of Parliament is passed, and within that Act of Parliament, it says that under certain circumstances that ministers can make changes to that legislation without actually having to go back to Parliament and create a new Act. So these are called statutory instruments. Apparently, the Queen's speech is going to include some restriction on the House of Lords to prevent these statutory instruments being simply rubber stamped. But as well as that, there's going to be some education aspect to this. Remains to be seen exactly what that will be. But we've been talking about education quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, and we have a new conference coming along. This is the Education for Global Citizenship Conference, and it's being held in Korea. And they have published a document which will soon, they say, be open for public comment. It's the draft outcome document. So they haven't even had the conference yet, Pat, but they've already decided what the outcome is going to be. And so they've created a draft outcome statement. This is called Education for Global Citizenship, Achieving the Sustainable Development Goals Together. Now, at the weekend at AV7 at the end, we had a question and answer session with all the people presenting. And there was a very good question from one of the younger participants who's still at school, asking about Agenda 21 because she was having Agenda 21 pushed on her in school. So there was quite a discussion about that among the panelists, but this takes it to a new level because they're actually talking about further promoting the development goals through education. It says, we, the participants of the 66th conference, adopt this action agenda so that all nations may realize the aspirations of the 2030 Global Agenda for Sustainable Development. An ethos of global citizenship is required in order to fulfill this bold, people-centered, universal and planet-sensitive development framework. That all sounds very good, doesn't it? And in order to achieve Agenda 2030, we recognize the importance of Sustainable Development Goal 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong opportunities for all. Well, we're going to be talking more about lifelong opportunities in a second. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship. In the spirit of global citizenship, in which our primary identity is that of human beings, all people, regardless of circumstances, should have access to lifelong learning opportunities that help them acquire the knowledge and skills needed to exploit opportunities and to participate fully in society. And so it goes on. This is the type of language. It ends up by saying, it's all about education right the way through this. Therefore, be it resolved, they say at the end, we the people gathered at the 66th Annual United Nations DPI NGO Conference will continue to work on the furtherance of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development with a particular emphasis on promoting education for global citizenship. This is what is driving the whole NGO sector. And of course, the NGO sector is going to have a nice crop of freshly educated talent, in inverted commas, to continue their work in all kinds of different countries.
Well, judging by the wording there, Mike, if you're familiar with the American education advocate Charlotte Iserby, the author, she had a book called The Dumbing Down of America, and she also dragged what they call the Common Core education system in
yes.
there. And so what you're reading here is the blueprint for the dumbing down of the world, essentially. And there was a bit about personality. Can you find me that point? You said something about developing the personality, lifelong personality of the child.
Yes, education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms.
Okay, the personality, I just want to make a social comment here. Personality is something that is imposed on people by society. Individuality, which is not in that text,
Yes.
is something that can't be imposed by society, but it's inherent with the individual and is more related to their family.
I think that's a really important point, because this is the same type of analogy between human rights and God-given inalienable rights. It's the same type. So we're getting personality and we're getting human rights, and we should have individuality and God-given rights.
Personality is a construct, and the fact that it's in the language of that document is very disturbing to me.
Yes.
Because it shows me that the people who've drafted this and the think tanks who've created this have a very shallow, in my opinion, this is a very shallow understanding of what the human experience is.
Absolutely.
And they're trying to administrate it by force through these quangos.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes. Now, a week or two ago, we were pointing out this conference from the British Council along the same kind of lines, using education to promote this type of global citizenship. And we highlighted this quote from Matt Hancock: "The spread of openness, open democracy, open markets, open societies, and open access to education for all have been the seeds of change, because these things empower the people. In fact, these things limit the people." I mentioned lifelong learning. Well, this is a new part of the government's lifelong learning program called Foresight. Now, this has just newly been launched, and I don't know too much about it yet. It's from the Government Office for Science. I didn't know we had a Government Office for Science, but there you go. It's quite Government Office for something is it's quite Soviet. Is that the right word? The type of language?
Sort of. What do they do in the Government Office for Science?
Yes.
Weights and measures? Anything else? I don't know.
I don't know. But anyway, Foresight is promoting lifelong learning, and of course it's lifelong learning within the model of this UN Education for Global Citizenship and these types of operations. And I just want to remind everybody about the Russell quote, because it's so appropriate. I think the subject which will be of most importance politically is mass psychology. Its importance has been enormously increased by the growth of modern methods of propaganda. Of these, the most influential is what is called education. And, that says it all, doesn't it?
Mm. So lifelong opportunities, this translates into cradle to grave.
Lifelong propagandizement.
Sure, yeah. So this what does this include? Endless amount of courses for adults, and for everything from, I don't know, getting a PhD in photography when you're 80, I guess. So I guess they don't want people to retire and enjoy themselves. They want to keep them busy.
Absolutely.
Taking courses.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
On top of just trying to earn a living.
For the afterlife.
Yes.
So get ready for the afterlife. Yeah.
But right at the core of this, as we've been discussing more and more recently, is the NGO complex. The NGO complex, Pat, seems to be more important geopolitically now than the military-industrial complex in many ways.
Yeah, the NGO complex, and Vanessa Beeley brought this point home very, very strongly in her presentation at the AV conference over the weekend, that the NGO soft power complex is doing the work that military used to do. So instead of doing it by force, they're doing it through the third sector, or the non-governmental entities, and they're doing work on the ground that used to be done by intelligence services and by military.
Yes.
So this is the trend.
Well, this article in Sputnik, excellent article. I believe it's translated from a French article. Soros funded, absolutely focusing on George Soros and his money being behind many of these NGOs. And it goes through quite a history of Soros and his activities in many countries, including the fact that aside from his promotion of NGOs, that he directly intervenes in financial markets, for example, to attack the sovereign currencies of nation states, which of course he did even in Britain. Yeah. So if he's prepared to do it to Britain, he was prepared to do it to any country on the planet. So that is an excellent article, and I suggest people read it. Now, you mentioned Vanessa, and so we get a final opportunity to remind everybody that tonight Vanessa will be giving a presentation at the Wheat Sheaves pub in Bath Street in Frome. please do get along to this if you possibly can. Her presentation at the weekend was superb, as you say, and if anybody doesn't really understand the way the NGO complex works in the Middle East, and remember that this model applies to just about every country in the world in some way. So if you look at the way the NGOs operate in the Middle East, you can pretty much look at any country and see the same type of operation happening. Come to see Vanessa discuss this and ask any questions that you have.
I think it's one point I want to make, Mike, that's really important about this. You said that these NGOs and these operations are happening all over the world, in every single country. Now, the countries that are suffering the most by these NGOs, many of them are banning these NGOs.
Yes.
So what happens, and this is the thing that people need to understand, what happens overseas eventually comes home to roost. And the militarization of Iraq and Afghanistan was translated into a police state at home. So the NGO soft power complex will be unleashed on domestic Europe.
Yes.
In the very near future. They're developing the technologies in war zones, conflict zones, and then they unleash it back at home, just as this is how the police state was developed. This is how private mercenary security firms have taken over now. They've made their money and developed their business models in Iraq and Afghanistan and all these war-torn countries.
Yeah.
So if you think it's just because it's overseas doesn't mean it's not going to be a problem that you're going to have to face at home.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tomorrow is the third Wednesday of the month, and that means it's UK column meeting time. So if you can get along to the George in Plimpton, Vanessa and Patrick will be joining me there. Brian's still away, so he will miss this particular meeting, but do get along to this if you can. Okay, speaking of regime change, this is a good article in the Hindu. Go and have a look at it. They're talking about the removal of Dilma Rousseff in Brazil, and they are absolutely calling it regime change. And they're discussing why this might have happened. Now, perhaps it's unsurprising that in Argentina they have been through a similar type of operation as is going on in Brazil at the moment, but the sort of the attack on de Kirchner, who was the president there, continues, and now she's being accused of corruption, and she's being prosecuted over currency trades. Well, these currency trades, Pat, this was one of these Soros-type attacks on Argentina, and so she took action to fend off these currency-related attacks, and as a result, she's, through a form of colour revolution, has been gotten rid of, and now she's continuing to be attacked and being prosecuted. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the chaos in Argentina continues. Once she was gotten rid of, they imposed pretty draconian austerity, and we're seeing thousands demonstrating against the austerity in Argentina at the moment. And surprise, surprise, since these color revolutions, these regime changes in Brazil and Argentina, now they're realigning themselves, as I was being described, from the BRICS back to the Western-based free trade initiatives. So they're not just talking about free trade agreements between Brazil and Argentina. They're now talking about free trade agreements with Mexico and a whole bunch of other countries, and they're being drawn into the Western free trade arrangements, which is only going to rape these countries of any wealth that they may have.
What you're looking at here is quite simple. This is just an extension of NAFTA southwards. So NAFTA had come all the way down to Mexico.
Yes.
And this is just basically opening the gates. Again, we don't need military coups. We don't need to hire any guerrillas living in the jungle and taking over the government. We can do this through the media. In Brazil, TV Global has more or less a monopoly over television coverage. And if you ask any Brazilian who is watching this show will tell you that in the end, TV Global will decide who wins the elections. They'll decide who gets impeached. They'll decide who's the losers. And in Argentina, Christine Fernandez as well has been demonized by certain media outlets. We see the same thing happening in Venezuela, where certain privately owned media outlets will continually demonize and undermine the state while financial raiders like the likes of George Soros, crashing bond markets, attacking currencies, and all in an effort to destabilize whatever that government is. So this is a soft way, well, it's quite hard for the people, but soft regime change, as it were.
This is something that we're seeing in so many countries. This
is hybrid warfare. This is kind of another layer of hybrid warfare.
And we can't understate how people have got to understand the activities of the NGOs and Soros in particular right across the planet.
Yeah, the NGOs you'll cover this later in the week with Vanessa, but that what they do is they soften the ground.
Yes.
But the media, especially in South America, the media is absolutely crucial in determining the outcome of whatever the political destiny is of any of these countries.
Well, you actually at AV yesterday you gave a workshop on the media. This type of thing was a theme of that.
And I mentioned TV Global in Brazil, and I think they have strung up Dilma Rousseff just mercilessly and demonized her in such a way that's to me it's quite clear. A lot of Brazilians will tell you this of a certain education level. They'll say this has always been the way in Brazil. But what's shocking to me, Mike, is that the United States, the political environment is more and more reflecting South America with each passing year, and the media is behaving in a partisan fashion in much the same way that's just the norm in South America. And so we'll see what happens in this next election cycle.
Okay. Unarmed rural police are apparently like sitting ducks in the event of a UK terror attack. So this was a discussion on Radio 4 this morning. Of course, Radio 4's Today programme sets the news agenda for the day, and here we go. Apparently, unarmed rural police. The police are pretty well. This was a Police Federation rep. Saying that that rural police are pretty nervous about being unarmed. They're worried that the nearest armed response team might be up to 30 miles away. And Pat, I just wonder: is it likely that ISIS is going to attack a haystack in a field in Somerset? Is that something that rural police particularly need to be worried about?
Yeah, I'm sure that the residents of the hamlet of Thrupney are very, very worried about ISIS unleashing a spate of terror attacks. And think about all the high-value targets in some of these. You've got the local, the pubs that usually get about between 4 and 15 punters a day.
Yes.
And then you also have the local post office, which is only open for 1 hour a day.
Yes.
And then it's just endless. There's parking lots. You've got handmade soap shops. I mean, it's a lot of high-value terror targets. And so I can see why they're really concerned about this. And the confusion with, duck hunters, and they could be confused with terrorists or soldiers. I don't know. There's a lot of potential for confusion.
Absolutely.
Farmers everywhere and lots of dogs.
I mean, a farmer with a beard is going to be particularly concerned at this.
Could be confused as Taliban. Yeah. Someone could panic. Anything could happen. They really...
So what's going on here? Is this softening us all up for broader arming of the police, or is it softening us up for terror? Even if you're in the countryside, you're not safe. Is this the message, or is it both of those? Do you think
it's got to be? For anyone that thinks that some Islamic terrorist cell has any desire to want to go into the English countryside and attack it's just ridiculous. You know what this represents? This represents the lobbying by some security companies who are providing all these equipment, body armor, helmets, helmet cams, guns, devices, etc. And they're lobbying for these contracts. And so then you have the media all of a sudden putting up all these stories, and then the chatter will in Westminster go to this subject, and we really need to, and then we're one step away. One little event or fake event. It doesn't even need to be a real event. It could be a drill or something. And then all of a sudden, well, we need to arm the rural police, or hunting accident or something. Who knows what it would be like.
Yeah.
But it's ridiculous, in my opinion. It just seems ridiculous.
It's utterly ridiculous. Yeah. Okay, and we'll end with this one then, because this is the Competition and Markets Authority, and they are saying that they want to work harder to deal with bank competition. There is no competition in the banks, between the banks, because the banking system is a cartel. There can't be any competition under those circumstances. The only way that there could ever be genuine competition with the banking sector is if the laws which regulate what types of organizations can call themselves a bank were changed, and that the market was opened up. If the market was opened up to allow you or I to establish a bank, then we would have a chance of some competition in the banking sector. But this is just nonsense. The Competition and Markets Authority is living in cloud cuckoo land if they think that they are going to do anything to improve competition between the banks.
That's the number one legacy, by the way, of the 2008 subprime housing crash. The overwhelming legacy was the reconsolidation of the banking industry. Absolutely, in America, I could tell you that a number of good, long-standing generational regional banks were knocked out of the market.
Hundreds of them, absolutely, in America, hundreds of them.
And small lenders,
yes,
and private lenders, everything was wiped out. And so that the consolidation created a much smaller cartel of a few very large companies. And this also happened with the insurance crisis through Obamacare, created a huge consolidation of the insurance industry in America to a very now tight-knit cartel that has an open door to lobby to central government for whatever they want. They're making better profits than ever. And in terms of the bank, they're allowed to levy charges and fines that maybe they wouldn't have been able to do before because there was competition in the market. So when cartels and monopolies are basically the enemy for the consumer. You're going to be more fees, higher prices, worse service, and maybe less lending. Who knows? But and more, well, except for the high interest rate credit cards.
But you raise a really important point, because the banking system in the United States was always completely different to that, and now you're much closer to what we have here. So in this country we have 5 or 6, whatever it is, high street banks that own all the branches, and there's no competition between those 5 or 6 big banks. In the States, you had much more independent banking with small. You didn't have the concept of a big name of a bank owning lots and lots of branches right across the country. So your local bank was your local bank. It maybe had 5 or 6 branches in the state or something.
Yeah, we had regional state banks.
Yes.
There was a couple of national chains, but they didn't dominate the market before. And but when they consolidated with the Bill Clinton's great gift to the world was the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which basically removed the firewall between speculative investment banking and high street retail banking, merging those together and creating the conditions for a perfect storm in 2008. So, and again, reconsolidation after the problem, reaction, solution. And so it's not healthy at all. Lack of competition.
Okay, brilliant. And on that note, we'll finish for today. Thank you very much for joining me, Patrick.
My pleasure.
Patrick will be with us again tomorrow, and we'll be joined by Alex Thompson from Eastern Approaches. So looking forward to that one. Do join us at 1 o'clock as usual. And I'll just advise that I did forget to change the closing titles again. So this is not Brian.
No offense taken.
We'll see you then. Bye-bye.